I don't think we can understand Burkina Faso or Upper-Volta in isolation, because once we connect the history, then we understand the present, not only of Upper-Volta, Burkina Faso, but of the entire African continent. The African continent was formerly partitioned amongst the European powers in 1884. They had a conference in Berlin, Germany, called the Berlin Conference, November 1884 to February 1885. So you had the French there, you had the British, the notorious imperial powers. The Portuguese were there, Spain, Germany, of course, the host, Italy, Belgium. So the French apportioned for themselves huge slices in West Africa and parts of North Africa as well. The British, some parts of West Africa, countries that are now modern nations of Ghana, for example, Nigeria, those were British colonies. And in East Africa, you have Uganda, Kenya, and the British inherited what was Tanganyika after Germany was defeated in World War. And then it became a quote unquote UN trustee, but in essence, a British colony. And why did they do this? Because they didn't want to fight amongst themselves. So they said, if we're going to do any fighting, any exploitation, let's exploit the Africans, right? So they set out and they brought boots in the ground. They set up the colonial regimes and administrations throughout Africa. They exploited African labor. They exploited African resources. So in other words, the entire continent became like a plantation, a European plantation. And the way to see colonization is um, the successor of plantation slavery in the so-called New World after the abolition of the slavery regime. They just simply transformed it into colonialism in Africa and, of course, in other parts of the world. And that's how the people that now live in what we know as Burkina Faso came into contact with the French. Obviously, they were part of a larger French region of colonial control in West Africa. So if you look at what happened in 1884 to seize chunks of territory in Africa and then use that as a source of cheap labor, of resource plunder, minerals, whether they're metals, whether they're natural resources, timber, gold, diamond, and then at a later stage, even uranium. So each African colony was providing different products to the various European colonial powers. That was 1884. So let's fast forward to today in the 21st century. The arrangement is still absolutely the same.
Correct.
So the same African countries still provide, and I've left out one other um, part. They became consumers of the products that were being manufactured in the factories in Europe using the resources from Africa. And then, of course, the products were plundered or at less than survival uh, income. And the products they bought, the manufactured products, were at highly inflated prices. And that was the relationship. And that explains why the countries that became industrialized and became wealthy continued to grow wealthier, and the countries that were exploited continued to become, um, in fact, uh, that's where the term immiserization comes in. Things got actually worse progressively, not only in 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 relative terms, but even in absolute terms. And that is precisely what the conditions are today. That is the relationship that exists in the 21st century, not only between Burkina Faso and France and the industrialized world, but the entire African continent and the industrialized world. So once you see that broad picture that affects all those African countries, then you understand when you see any incident or events going on in Burkina Faso, you can understand when you see something similar happening in a different African country.